Good morning. I was introduced, my name is Nick Kuriger, and this is the Cybersecurity and Local Government Navigating Compliance and Risk. So here's a picture of me. Unfortunately, video is not working today, but I've got 25 years of experience in IT and cybersecurity, and I hold 13 EC Council certifications, including CCISO, CEH Master, and others. I've also got several degrees in IT. So without further ado, here's the presentation. So setting the stage here, we're talking about local government and compliance and cybersecurity. And I have to say that unlike other organizations, local government is an extremely complex environment. You've got regular enterprise IT supporting multiple departments: public safety, libraries, finance, HR, elections, legal, planning, and many others. But then you also have to throw in things like operational technology and Internet of Things environments, such as water treatment plants, power plants, and traffic. And that includes webcams and controlling traffic lights and dealing also with waste. So you've got a lot of things going on in the OT, IoT world. And then you will throw in multiple locations. So office buildings, police and fire station, water and electrical plants, dumps, airports in some cases, even ports. And so an IT organization has to take in all of this into account, or less. It all depends. There's different size local governments. We're talking cities, counties, towns. They could have any of this, some of this, and sometimes a very small subset. I've had the opportunity to do cybersecurity assessments on several local governments in the state of Virginia. And so my frame of reference is within the state of Virginia and the several assessments that I've done on cybersecurity for these locations. And that's what you're going to hear from me. You may have a different experience, but this is what I have. So I think one of the important things when we look at governance for IT and cybersecurity is, where does it fit within an organization? And here's a representation of the county. A city might be very similar. A city manager with different department heads and city manager positions in the same areas. But I've seen that unlike in the corporate environment where you have a CEO, a COO, a CFO, and a CIO, where they're relatively on the same plane of leadership, when it comes to IT, they have a tendency of being buried at least 3 levels deep, which is what you see here. And more than likely, there's not a separate CISO or Director of Cybersecurity type position in local government. At least not on the same level as Director of IT. It's going to come in somewhere underneath IT if it comes in at all. Because in the assessments that I've done and looking at different local governments in Virginia, there's rarely, if ever, a dedicated cybersecurity position. It all rolls into IT. And so when IT is buried 3 levels deep, what kind of input does IT have on the governance of IT throughout a locality? It becomes very difficult. The IT leader of that locality is going to have good relations with fellow department heads, and then the deputy county managers for different for different areas of the county: public safety, community operations, administration, community affairs. They have to, in order for them to get any type of governance to work, because IT crosses all of these functional areas. IT is going to be involved in public utilities, and it's going to be involved in public safety. And you're going to want to ensure that you've got good governance, that you've got good cybersecurity programs. And what are you trying to protect from? So local government is going to have the same attack vectors as any other organization. They're going to have ransomware. They're going to have phishing attempts. They're going to have insider threats. They're going to have, which say a law firm wouldn't have, operational technology vulnerabilities, IoT vulnerabilities. And with the growing use of things like SaaS, software as a service, and cloud, they were going to have third-party vendor vulnerabilities and attack vectors. But where it's different with local government is the impact. Sure, a company's going to have financial loss. Sure, they're going to have some type of a hit on their brand, but they're not going to have a breach of citizen trust. They may have some type of service disruption. What is that service? Is it Netflix? Okay, so we can't watch TV. But what happens when we don't have water? What happens when we don't have power? What happens when our trash doesn't get picked up because of some type of threat, some type of attack that has affected the ability for a local government to do what we ask them to do, and to the point where it could possibly harm the citizens. Police can't respond to calls. If fire department, if ambulance service is included in the fire department, they can't respond to physical medical emergencies. So that's going to impact the quality of life, our ability to live, our ability to drink water, our ability to cool ourselves in the summer, heat ourselves in the winter, if some type of attack affects the local government. So, shouldn't they be have some type of regulatory and compliance requirements? In Virginia, where I live, there's very little regulatory and compliance requirements that are forced upon or required by local governments. So there's some key frameworks and mandates that they may have to apply to. If they've got some type of health department, they'll have to apply to it. HIPAA will apply to them. If they've got police services where they have access to the criminal justice information services, they're going to be audited, but maybe not the whole county, not the whole city. The state's going to give them suggestions on what they should be using for security policies and how they secure their county, their city. In Virginia, a locality could follow. It's not suggested, it's not required. Virginia Sec 530, which is a subset of NIST 853, they are required by the Department of Elections to do self-assessments of their information security, but only how it applies to elections. And they may not apply it to the rest of the county's functions or the rest of the city's functions. So really, we've got towns and cities and counties that are they're not audited, they're not regularly enforced to comply with regulations, except only in those small areas where they are. And so the question is do they establish a cybersecurity governance structure if they're not required to form one? And In many cases, or at least in the cases that I've seen, is no. Sometimes when we go to do assessments, we find that they don't really have plans in place. They don't have policies in place. They don't have correct procedures in place. They don't have governance because there's nothing forcing that down to them. Or they found that because where they are in the structure of the city or county government, they're buried 3 levels deep. Maybe they don't have the ability to enforce some types of plans and policies throughout the rest of the city and the county or the town. But they should. And there's several blockers to that besides what I've just talked about. There's definitely a difference between the haves and the have-nots. You've got large counties, you've got large cities that are affluent or have a greater tax base, and a larger IT department to handle the large amount of citizenry that they have. And so they'll probably be the ones that do have plans and policies and procedures in place. They're the ones that probably get looked at a little bit harder by the typical things that keep government in line, like the news media and active citizenry. But when we're looking at smaller localities, medium-sized cities, smaller cities, medium-sized counties, there's a good chance that they may not have plans, policies, procedures in place, or they could be inadequate. But regardless, they have to do some type of risk management. Even the ones that I've gone to that don't really have plans, policies, procedures in place, they do some type of risk management. And it's important to do that. And in order to do risk assessments, you have to understand what assets you have and what assets are included in an IT infrastructure. And it's going to be different for different locations, different localities. You're going to have, of course, the laptops, the desktops, the servers, the switches, the routers, the firewalls, wireless access points, but it may be other things too. Right? It's going to be the IoT devices, the cameras that are on traffic lights, the cabinets near the traffic intersections that control those traffic lights. That's all run based on a wired network. And then what other devices do they have in that location, in that locality? Do they have operational technology devices that are connected to their network? I hope not. I hope that's segmented. I hope that OT is segmented from their enterprise network. And I would hope that Internet of Things devices, cameras, are also segmented from their enterprise networks. But you have to understand what those threats are. Those localities have to understand what the threats are of having these different assets on their system and how they should be segmented. And of course, you want to make sure that you're taking care of vulnerabilities. And what does that mean, though? Having a vulnerability management program. Does that mean that we're patching Windows? Yeah. So every patch Tuesday that comes out, second Tuesday of the month, we hope that our cities and counties are doing those patches on their Windows servers, their Windows workstations. But that's just patching. That's not a vulnerability management program. And I found that in many cases, that's what the definition is for these medium-sized and smaller localities. Their vulnerability management program was just patching Windows and nothing else. And so they're not doing vulnerability scans in some cases on their network. So they're not looking at configuration issues with those Windows devices. They're just looking to see if they're patched or not, or that they're applying those patches that just came out, and are they making sure that those patches took? But what about all the other devices that are out there that we talked about when we talked about asset identification? Did they scan for IoT devices, the cameras? Did they scan for the traffic cabinets that control the traffic lights? Is that part of their vulnerability management program? Are there access devices? Do they scan for that? Are they scanning for devices that perhaps shouldn't be on their network, like Apple Watches, because they've connected their wireless network to their main network? So there needs to be a vulnerability management program in place. That's key. So key things that a locality and any business, any organization needs to have is they need to identify their assets, and they need to have a vulnerability management program just in place, something more than just patching. So there are many localities that are doing that, but what's telling them to do that? It's got to be the plans, policies, and procedures, or it's just out of habit because they know that's what they're supposed to do. But they also need to have that backing. They need to have the backing of the plans, policies, and procedures to make sure that they have something to follow. Otherwise, it's just what they think is their good practice. So what kind of frameworks can we put in place to help localities, to help organizations with their cybersecurity? For corporate IT governments, there's COVID out there by ISAC. That's a great framework of making IT work. How do we secure our IT infrastructure? Some of the two best frameworks out there is CIS Controls version 8.1 and NIST Cybersecurity Framework 2.0. I particularly like the CIS Controls version 8.1. It's very simple to follow and implement. And doing it at its base level gives you great cybersecurity hygiene. The CIS Controls version 8.1 by the Center for Internet Security, you can go there to the website and download it. It comes in 3 implementation groups. Implementation group 1, which is basic cybersecurity hygiene. A little bit higher, implementation group 2, and then implementation group 3. Every organization out there that has information technology should implement CIS Controls version 8.1, implementation group 1. All of that should apply. That's where you look for your assets, both software and hardware. That's where you put a vulnerability management program in place. It's telling you how you should do it, roughly, and letting you know if it's implemented or not. There are 56 controls for implementation group 1. And if you follow all of those, then there's you've got good cyber hygiene, and that includes things like security awareness plans or security awareness training for your employees. It includes disaster recovery. So I urge you, if you don't already do it, to look at CIS Controls version 8.1. It's an easy way to then implement other more stringent controls like NIST Cybersecurity Framework 2.1 or 2.0, and then also the NIST 853 that gets extremely in-depth when it comes to cybersecurity controls. And included with this, inside of CIS Controls version 8.1 and the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, is having an instant response plan and ability to escalate it. One thing that is required for any locality, city, county, town in Virginia is if there is an incident, they have to report it when it's cyber to the state police. So that is required. And that should be part of an incident response plan that they have, if they have one. And if they don't have one, they really need to put one together. So how do you build a resilient cybersecurity program? You've got to implement layered security. Defense in depth? Yes, to a point. You've got to put firewalls in place. You've got to put endpoint protection in place and identity. And MFA is a part, really, of identity. When it comes down to the way things are now and the growing environment when we're using cloud services, what is the front line of defense? Isn't that firewall anymore? After COVID? Maybe, maybe not, because we're working from home sometimes, or all the time, or every day but one. So there's most organizations out there allow us to work from home. And so that firewall work is not protecting us. Not anymore. We're not behind it. We're taking our laptops that we got during COVID and we're taking them home and we're using them to work. So that means that we've got to make sure we've got great endpoint protection in place, because that's the new front line. It's no longer the firewalls that protect you from the bad guys on the internet. It's your endpoint protection and your home Wi-Fi. But also just as important is identity. That's what's protecting our software as a service applications like Microsoft 365, Google Workspaces, and MFA helping us with that. But we got to make sure that we're doing backups. We've got a good backup program in place. That's how we're going to survive some type of a ransomware attack. Now we hear big buzzes around zero trust. And what is zero trust? I've got a firewall that says that it provides zero trust, or I've got network appliances that they're going to provide zero trust. Well, it's not something you can buy. It's a strategy. Zero trust is a strategy that you put in place. That means you're not going to trust things that you used to trust inside of your network. So you're removing the trust between your devices and making sure that you verify things. So how do you do that? You do that with segmentation. And you do that through micro-segmentation. You're not going to let, why should building A be talking to building B when they're only utilizing things in building C? So that is something that I've seen in localities that are sometimes a problem, where they have a flat network structure, where you can be in any building in a city that the city owns, connect to their network, and be able to access any other building. So they need to be looking at segmentation. Segmentation is important to put in place when you have a distributed network. If you're not just on one floor of a building, that's what cities and counties definitely need to keep looking at doing, is segmentation, and making sure that that part of the network is only talking to the other part of the network that they absolutely positively need to. And then you do additional micro segmentation, making sure that those resources are only accepting traffic from those devices, those other segments of the network that need to access their information. And then you apply that to the wireless and remote access too. So often I see localities using wireless. I'm not a big fan of having wireless networks on my internal network. Why do you need that there if you've got something like a VPN? So I never like to expose my network to wireless. But I understand the reason to do that, but there's got to be controls in place. And it's a strong belief for me that a good control is not a passphrase. You've got to have something like certificate-based or something like Radius and 802.1x or E when it comes to wireless access on a critical network. Otherwise, wireless should be segmented from the rest of your network. You shouldn't have access to where you're keeping your important things, your critical infrastructure, your crown jewels. And with that is remote access. And you want to make sure that, sure, we use VPNs now because we are working from home. And maybe not everything is up in the cloud. Maybe we don't have all of our documents in Microsoft 365. And maybe there's only certain ways we can access the applications that we're using, so we have to remote in through a VPN. Well, it's important to make sure that when we're doing that we're doing it extremely securely. We've got multi-factor authentication involved in that remote access, and that we're segmenting traffic to where it needs to go by the principles of least privilege. And then moving on to our vendors and vendor risk management. It's now more and more important to understand what our vendors are providing, especially now if they're cloud vendors. So everyone, we can say a blanket everyone or most people know what Microsoft Azure provides and what AWS provides based upon their service models, infrastructure as a service. You know that you're in charge of everything from the operating system up. But what about those smaller providers and cities, counties, towns? They may not be utilizing the Microsofts and the Amazons of the world. They may be using the small mom and pop cloud service providers and leveraging servers that they're basically running out as infrastructure as a service. And I've seen where there's not a clear understanding of what a locality is supposed to do with those servers. You know, they get virtual servers spun up, and then it's in their mind that they're just using the software that's on it, and they're not responsible for taking care of the operating system, doing updates and whatnot. And they go years without having updates applied to those servers. And what kinds of things are running on that? Well, it could be, in some cases, everything that runs their 911 system or a computer-aided dispatch for their fire department, for the police department. So that could be a problem. That is a problem, really. So you have to understand what a vendor is going to do for you versus what your responsibilities are. And you've got to understand what the warranties are. And with that, you have to, when you're engaging with vendors, you have to make sure that you do your contract right. You have to make sure that you've got a right to audit, especially when they're not those big companies. When they're those small companies that are trying to do business with local government. You got to make sure that you have the capability to ensure that their cybersecurity is good, because that may be where the bad guys come in from, or there could be vulnerabilities and risks that are not apparent. And it's definitely important to have your staff trained, not just your IT staff, but what is the biggest attack surface that an organization has? When we go back and we look at the first bullet point, and what did I say? Firewalls. We're not always behind those. So we're relying on endpoint protection to protect our environment. We're relying on identity and multi-factor authentication to protect our cloud services. But that's not enough. Or more likely, that's a compensating control to make sure that the person who's operating those devices is trained, that they are aware of cybersecurity concerns. So it's important to do cybersecurity awareness training for your staff. And not just training, testing, doing phishing tests on your users to make sure that they understand what a email that's a phishing attempt looks like, and do it often. So that has to be something a locality is doing constantly. Any organization should be doing that constantly. And another way to handle risk is risk transference by having cyber security insurance. That is always an important consideration in making sure that the insurance that you have will cover any damages or liability that a locality might have if they are breached. So how do we fund this? Well, first off, it gets funded by your tax dollars, and the fees for the water that you use if they're providing water, the power fees if they're providing power. But that's never enough, and that's why you see the haves and the have-nots. Those locations, those localities that may not have enough IT people to handle the load that they have. When you look at, say, an average size county or city, they may have 500 total employees. And how many of those are IT? What should it be? Should it be 10%, 50? Should it be 20%, 25? Usually it's a lot less. Usually it's a lot less than any percent. I've seen localities with 500 people with under 10 IT folks. And those are the people who are the IT leader, whatever the title happens to be, help desk people. There's no security position. There's a person that knows the network. There's a person that knows maybe some servers. There's a person that knows the applications that are being used, and that might just be it. There might be somebody that knows the telecommunications. So IT departments are running extremely lean when it comes to the have-nots of the local government world, the medium to small cities and towns and counties. And they've got a huge workload that's extremely diverse. So they need funding. It may not be enough to fund employees, but it might be enough to fund certain things, like a new EDR solution. You may be able to fund some type of managed security services provider. And so there are grants from state and federal that have come out. In Virginia, you'd have to apply through state entities, specifically for local governments and tribal governments and territorial governments. There could be groups that have some type of cooperative purchasing agreements when a region gets together and they purchase licenses as a group so they can get a better discount. And again, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, the managed security service providers that could come in and play the role of their cybersecurity professionals and implement services for them. In some cases, there are, of course, towns and counties out there that don't have IT. They've completely outsourced their information technology to a managed service provider. Now, those probably aren't the ones that are providing water treatment plants, or the ones that aren't providing electricity, or the ones that aren't providing an airport or a port or something along those lines, but they're still providing services, trash and traffic, police, fire, and other emergency services. But they're a lot smaller. There are other resources that are public-private partnerships. I mentioned them earlier, the Center for Internet Security. They've got a great deal of free resources for anyone, including the CIS controls version 8.1. That's free to download. They've got benchmarks that are free to look at. And they also run information sharing and analysis centers. In the case for local and state governments, they've got the MS-ISAC. That's what that's MS-ISAC. That's how you say it. The Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center, and that will provide lots of different resources. It will provide intelligence, emails that you get saying the criticality of certain vulnerabilities as they come out, as they get analyzed. They could provide low-cost network monitoring, low-cost endpoint detection and response. Take a look at it if that's, I don't want to be a commercial for them, but these are very good options for those local governments to protect themselves. And the pricing's already been negotiated. So coming over here to key takeaways and recommendations, really proactive governance is the key to resilience. So that IT leader has to establish connections throughout that locality, to the other directors, to the other people that are senior to them. And they have to evangelize security, and they have to evangelize governance. The fact that IT needs to be there to help. Because I've seen, and I didn't talk too much about it earlier, but environments where there's operational technology involved, like waste treatment plants and electrical plants, and IT has no insight into that, which is bad, especially if over time those OT environments have set up their own, we could call it, well, what do we call it? They set up their own IT environments that are independent from the enterprise IT, which could result in a greater exposure to something happening to the OT environment, where they set up their own domains, their own workstations and servers without the expertise of IT folks, IT professionals. I've seen that happen. They think that they know exactly what they're doing, and they've set it up. They have a parallel network. They're still using services from the enterprise IT, but yet they've created their own separate IT domain. So that shadow IT is what that is, and a lot of times they don't have the governance that even the minimal governance sometimes that enterprise IT in a local or county government might have. If that IT leader isn't strong. So compliance is a baseline, not a goal. So at least let's get to being compliant to certain frameworks and putting things in place. And There are uh, things, regulations, frameworks that localities have to comply to, but they segment it out. So they don't comply to maybe completely for the whole county, the whole city, election security standards. They just carve it out to the people who deal with elections, the general register. They carve out the part that deals with the justice information system. So it should, they should work to make those compliance requirements apply to the whole locality. They should prioritize risk-based investment and controls. One of those things would be knowing what your assets are and understanding the vulnerabilities by creating a vulnerability management program. They need to ensure that they're arming those on the front lines, those that are the biggest attack surface that an organization has, staff, and promoting some type of a security first culture and doing security awareness plans or training. And then use everything else that's available to them, because there is a lot. So thank you. Thank you for your time, and I hope that you've gained some insight from this. And I think that there's some things to do with a poll, and then some opportunities to ask questions. It could be segmentation is definitely a solution for IoT devices. You would want to have IoT devices segmented from the rest of your network, especially when, let's say those devices were put in place 10, 15 years ago. There's a good chance that those devices haven't been updated. And they've got, what do they have running on them? They've got little mini web servers running on them that could have, that could be Linux, could have Apache on it. And what does that mean? It could mean that they have log4j. So they log4j vulnerabilities. So there's a good chance that those things are those devices are highly vulnerable if someone were to be able to connect to them. So segmenting them from other critical parts of your network is definitely a good idea. Okay, that's an interesting question. There's how to get a job opportunity in IT or cybersecurity. Well, you definitely want to get some type of training, and then apply for cybersecurity positions. If you're interested in governance, where you're looking at that, where you're implementing controls, you're auditing and whatnot, take a look at Google how to become an auditor and look at opportunities in that location, that area. Well, I think any document that deals with governance would be a good starting point. I mean, you could look at COVID as a way to implement IT governance. If you're looking specifically for cybersecurity, I would say that any organization could fit CIS cyber controls 8.1 into their governance strategy for cybersecurity. Well, that's a lot to unpack. Let's see, the managing public data. Well, you've got to secure that data. Some of the best ways to do it is to make sure that you've got third parties that are helping you with that. But when that data resides inside the locality, they need to make sure it's protected, and that you've got controls in place to protect that data. Like implementing syscontrols 8.1. I keep coming back to that. Making sure you've got great database administrators and data owners that understand how that data is being used. Let's see. Well, that's kind of a hard question to answer. First, I don't manage it. I come in and assess it. But if we're looking at technologies for smart cities like traffic cameras and other ways to control how people move through the city or the county, then segmentation is always going to be important there. You need to segment those technologies from the rest of your environment. So that's a little bit different than when it comes to a corporation. Most of the data that a government has, there's the ability to FOIA it for get Freedom of Information Act in the United States, and especially when it comes down to localities in Virginia, their first order is to comply with information requests. So it's extremely important for localities to be transparent with what's going on and letting the citizenry know where things stand. Yeah, that's a great question. What do you do when you have no money and you have resources that you need to take a look at? So with a few $1,000s, I would say the best option is to get something like Nessus, or if you don't have the money for that, look at items like OpenBOSS using Linux, some type of vulnerability management database that can scan your network. It's that would be good options right there. And it all depends how big your network is. If your network's only 10 clients, then a free version of Nessus would be just fine. If you've got no budget and you've got 100 devices on your network, 100 workstations, a couple servers, something along those lines, then maybe you look at what's left of the open source vulnerability scanners, which is OpenBOSS. There's limited options out there, but there are options for vulnerability scanning applications that might have different tiered pricing. So, but that being said, that's not all there is to a vulnerability management program. So there's looking at what we call implementation guides. There's looking at SIS benchmarks and looking at that software, making sure you're meeting baseline configuration for whatever device, whatever software that you're putting into place. That's part of the vulnerability management as well. It's not just using a software application to scan and then update things. No, it's putting together in advance a certain benchmark for whatever tool that you're using, and then track any changes after that, any recommendations for configurations, and then updating that, understanding what protocols should be involved on your network. So right now, I think the recommendation is using TLS 1.2 and 1.3. You shouldn't be using anything less than that. And so if your network is running TLS 1.1 or less, or not even TLS, and you're running SSL or other encryption that is below TLS 1.2, you need to change that. And that should be part of a vulnerability management program. I'm not fully understanding that question, but I'll give you this answer. So, SIEM, that's I think that might be what you're talking about. If you've got devices out there that are collecting data, and they're sending those signals to a centralized location, which should be software information and event manager, a SIEM like Splunk, or Sentinel for Microsoft, or Security Onion, where you're getting data from your endpoints, you're getting data from your network, you're getting data from your servers, you're getting data from your SaaS solutions, and it's all going into a central point, and you're watching that, you're alerting on things that are anomalies, you've got some automation in place to automatically do things. I think that's what you're talking about. So that's what you need to do. You need to implement SIEMs with automation, with playbooks, that if it sees a certain event happening, it responds in a certain way to shut down traffic or to implement other types of security controls. I think that's what we're talking about here. Well, you definitely have to implement the baseline controls. Again, with the implementation group 1 for SIS controls, that and basic cybersecurity hygiene. Start off with that, and then see how that affects your operational environment. Thank you very much for joining. I appreciate you listening to me. I'm impressed at the large amounts of people that have come out, and I wish you a safe Tuesday.